Welcome to the Western Bell podcast series, with talks on traditional spiritual teaching and its application in the world today. The intention of this series is to offer something useful for those who are drawn to study themselves and engage practice on the spiritual path. New talks are posted twice each month. The content of the talks is for informational purposes only, and not to provide any kind of counseling, medical, or professional advice. This podcast is titled, Arising the Sacred Feminine. The talk was given by Myosho Ginny Matthews on June 20th, 2026 via Zoom. Ginny was a student of Joshu Sasaki Roshi for 40 years. She took lay ordination in 2000, leads retreats on practice, is a dance teacher and choreographer, and is featured in the book The Unknown She, 8 Faces of an Emerging Consciousness. In this presentation, she discusses her experience in a masculine-oriented Zen Rinzai tradition and the value of the contact she has had with traditions with female teachers, including Guru Mai and the Lakota Sioux medicine woman, Bear Eagle Bear. She speaks about embodiment practices that she has introduced in workshops she has led on the sacred feminine, such as programs facilitated with Regina Sarah Ryan. Ginny observes the increased interest in feminine icons today, which may be due to an unbalanced form of masculine patriarchy. She describes the partnership between the sacred masculine and the sacred feminine, and notes that the goddess is in every form of nature. If there is benefit in this talk for you, please consider sharing the link to it, or writing a review on social media or on one of the podcast platforms. Myosho Ginny Matthews.
Thank you. Thank you all for coming. The sacred feminine is not just confined to those in female bodies. It's a very important part of our spiritual zeitgeist, as we might say. So what I want to do is to start with an experience I had very recently, just a few months ago, that woke me up to something that I think I wasn't totally aware of. I was reading a book by an African woman, Dr. Tererai Trent. I was led to it by a friend, and I was intrigued by the fact that Oprah Winfrey had said of all her guests, Dr. Trent was her absolute favorite. So I thought that said something. So the book was The Awakened Woman, Remembering and Reigniting Our Sacred Dreams. That's the book. So the part that really jumped out at me was she was uniting social justice and spiritual practices. I find African teachers, and especially African women teachers, that's kind of a natural thing for them, not maybe so natural for us. She said, we all want to be of service. We all want to help. But if we do a little bit here and a little bit there and kind of not very focused, you're kind of dissipating that energy that could be more focused. So she urged us in this book to take time, or at least space, to contemplate what she said, the one thing that breaks your heart. And unhesitatingly, what arose for me, I didn't even need to contemplate it, was the one thing that breaks my heart is the demonization and denigration of the sacred feminine. And what I realized was that so many difficulties in our life come from that. The way we treat the planet, the way we treat women, arise from what has happened over 4,000 years, which has been an almost systemic demonization of the sacred feminine. So that was a big wake-up call. I mean, I didn't even understand that in myself. That really is what broke my heart. And then shortly after, so I'm getting a couple of messages here, I listened to an interview with a woman by the name of Megan Watterson. And you may or may not be familiar with her, but she has been very instrumental in resurrecting the true teachings and standing of Mary Magdalene. She said that as a fairly ardent Christian as a young woman, she felt very much pushed out of the imagery of divinity. It was very masculine and it had loaded messages. At that time, Mary Magdalene was the prostitute, and then there was the Virgin Mother Mary. And she was quite disturbed about this. And she finally decided that she needed to really get some authority that this is not the whole picture. So she entered Harvard Divinity School, and I think she ended up with her PhD, and she dove into the new evidence that had been coming out about the early Christians, not just Mary Magdalene, but many of the Marys. There were about 4 or 5 of them around Yeshua. That's the way she calls him, Yeshua. And the early Christians, which had a much more feminine structure. And she said that she needed to do this because she realized she could not believe that the divine was in her because of her female body. And she needed to really explore this. And then she also realized that if she couldn't believe that she was divine, then she couldn't believe that any other women held divinity. And that was another wake-up call for me. It's true, if you can't believe that the divine doesn't live in the female body, then yes, personally, you have to struggle with that. But subconsciously, you're also projecting that on other women. So those 2 wake-up calls came very close together. So I'm going to give you a little background of my personal search for the feminine, because it has been a 50-year process, even though these 2 wake-ups have just come at this point in my life. And I still continue to practice the Rinzai Zen form. So it's been 53 years. And yes, it is outwardly a very masculine form. And when I encountered it in the 70s, I think women were not necessarily looking for the divine feminine or even the feminine. Women wanted to claim some of that masculine power that they didn't have or felt couldn't have. I think it's still one of the few practices that is much more male people than female people. But I remember realizing that the women who were attracted to these practices were quite male identified, including myself. And that almost all, except for maybe 2 exceptions, had very difficult relationships with their mother. And we were much more comfortable identifying with the male teacher and the male monks. And I said we wanted to run with the boys. So this practice is warrior practice. It pushes you pretty hard. Someone called it boot camp. You're dealing with very little sleep, sometimes pain for long sittings, emotional pain sometimes it's coming up, as well as physical pain, and you just sit with it. And what I realized was later in my life, warrior practice can be very useful, especially for women. I went through 3 childbirths. Warrior practice really works well for childbirth. And then I went through a 6-year healing process to heal that relationship with the feminine, with my mother, which was extremely painful. And only my warrior practice allowed me to continue through the pain because I had practiced that, emotional pain, physical pain. So I'm very grateful for my warrior practice. And I also understand that Rinzai Zen practice, there is a feminine aspect, which is the relationship with the teacher and the work on the koans. So the koans are a way of embodying. There's much that is transcendent in Zen practice, the sense of samadhi, of dissolving the self completely. But because you are meeting with your teacher, in this case, 4 times a day, and manifesting your understanding of the koan, you have to embody also. So it was a much more balanced practice than it looks like on the surface. So I had very little faith in becoming a mother and having a family, and yet my deep, deep intuitive self said this was my path and my best spiritual path, which turned out to be in many ways. So I did become pregnant with my first child, and that was my first experience of one of these archetypes, Mother Mary and Kuan Yin and Green Tara, Mary Magdalene. These were all icons of the sacred feminine. So here I am pregnant. I think I was like 6 months pregnant. And I was on my way to Mount Baldy for a sesshin, which is a week-long retreat. Actually, I was going for 2 weeks to be there. And I stopped at the San Miguel Mission in California for a little rest stop. And I go out into the garden and I see this statue of Mary. And I have a total feeling that we are in relationship and there's communication here. And that she is saying, I'm going to be there for you. You're going to be a mother and you need some mother energy. Your own mother is not really there. And it was a really total surprise. I come from a Jewish background, though secular. Of course, Mary was Jewish, so there's DNA there. But it was a total surprise. And true enough, I felt her presence in all 3 pregnancies, and most especially my third. So that was my first encounter with what I think of as the sacred feminine, these manifestations of that sacred feminine energy. So here I am continuing my arduous practices, but I have a child now, and luckily my husband was very supportive. So when my son was old enough, I would go back. And then I had another child. And at one point, I'm realizing that it's very hard to integrate these more masculine, monastic, transcendent practices with my life as a mother and householder, as a householder. And I also felt like I did need to explore the feminine. So someone brought me to see a female teacher by the name of Guru Mai. And I remember my first encounter of going into the meditation hall in Oakland, filled with beautiful colors, and women are all dressed up, and there's perfume in the air and flowers everywhere. It's so beautiful. If you're not aware of the Zen aesthetic, it's very different. It's shaved heads, black clothes, period. So this was nurturing something in me. And then I did the darshan, and I had a very strong experience with this female teacher guru. And I was very confused because I still had great relationship with my teacher. And I remember trying to get a hold of somebody, one of the swamis, to say, I'm really confused here. You know, I've had this wonderful experience with Guru Mai, but I have my teacher, and I'm sort of blurting this out. And she got that I was a Zen person. She said, oh, I know who you need to talk to. So she brought over Ishwarananda, who had spent 5 years at a Rinzai temple in Daitokuji. So he totally understood the form. And I'm telling him how close I am to my teacher, and there's a lot about the form that I really love, but there's also problems. And then Guru Mai, I've had this wonderful experience. And he listened so patiently till I sort of stopped talking. And then he looked at me very clearly and he said, you know, you don't have to choose. And that was very wise. And I think that set me on this path of I don't have to choose. I've established myself in my Zen training, but it doesn't have to be exclusive. So that started me on a journey of finding practices that really, for me, brought the sacred feminine, or maybe I didn't even name it back in the 80s. I don't think this was that prevalent that we were trying to arise the sacred feminine. Oh, and then I had another experience with Guru Mai that really was beautiful because we were working with a monastic practice. We were all lay people except for very few who actually lived their life out at a Zen center. And there was not much understanding or honoring the householder practice. The idea is you left that behind and you came to the center. So with my third child, I had 3 boys. Guru Mai came into town and I wanted to be there. And they had set up a whole separate building for mothers and children. Guru Mai was in this huge theater of 5,000 people, but they were live streaming. And that was kind of unusual in early 90s, to have live streaming. So they set up this beautiful place that mothers could come with their babies and they could watch Guru Mai on the screen. And then these beautiful young women dressed in saris would come around and say, "Oh, we can hold your baby if you want to meditate." And I was like, oh, nobody offered that at a Zen center. And then when it came time for darshan, they took all the women and babies and children and put them at the head of the line of the 5,000 people because babies and children are not going to wait for darshan. So it was just a sense of being seen and honored as a mother in a spiritual community and practice, which was very special. And I wanted more of that. I also live in a town in Northern California, Sebastopol, and we were very lucky to have a Lakota Sioux medicine woman, Bear Eagle Bear, who ran a sweat lodge, a Lakota sweat lodge. And so I became involved with that for 15 years. And what I found with the native practices, that sense of your connection to the earth is so palpable. And gratitude is such a heart-opening practice. And that is 90% of the practices of the native spiritual practices. So it was a great complement to my Rinzai practice. There's a bit of warrior practice too when you go into a sweat lodge. So in the last few years, in conjunction with my dear friend Regina, and with a group called Women of Spirit and Faith, which I am a part of, I have been co-leading or simply helping to organize retreats of women in spirit and faith, where we are exploring what I call embodiment practice. So Regina and I were in Mexico very recently. And when we asked the people who brought us there if there was something they wanted us to focus on or a theme, they unhesitatingly said they wanted the sacred feminine. So it was really a perfect timing to bring what I call these embodiment practices to first some workshops and then to a 2-day retreat. So for me, being in nature is essential for arising the sacred feminine in many ways. So I've been the one who's been pushing the group to get out of the city and let's go into nature and do our meditation and do these practices in nature. So we're lucky to be in a beautiful little retreat center with the trees and the butterflies and the fish and the koi, and it was really wonderful. So what I want to do is share some of these embodiment practices that I have been practicing and developing over the years. Well, my other hat or life is that I'm a professional dancer and choreographer. I've been a professional dancer for as long as I've been a Zen student, practically 53 years. I still teach and occasionally perform, not as much as I used to. And I have been very interested in exploring dance as a spiritual practice. And that's very different from a performative technique that I was steeped in. So I've been bringing to these workshops and retreats circle dances, because everybody can do a circle dance. You can do step together, in, out, hold hands, not hold hands. And they are a wonderful way to unite the group. And movement is embodiment so clearly. And of course, when you add the music, it's even more. So what we have done at these retreats and workshops are circle dances. We've done free form movement. Regina brought the Gabriel Roth qualities to work with in free form movement. And then I've been working with what I call non-human entities. So what is it like to move like a tree? What is it like to move like a rock or a mountain, bird, or, getting you more in relationship with a non-human entity. So that's our movement practices that we do. And singing, of course, singing and chanting is a bodily practice. And my last retreat at Jemez Springs, we did drumming, because they had this wonderful supply of all these amazing drums. So we did drumming circle. So I've been really encouraging what I call these embodiment practices that everyone can do. The other thing that for me helps with embodiment are rituals. And so we've been exploring rituals. So first, they're what I would call the individual ritual, the one that you do on your own. One that many people, I'm sure, do. You have created an altar in your space. An altar would have some representative of the four elements. So you would have a stone or a statue. You would have a vase of water, or sometimes I just put a bowl of water. It doesn't have to be with flowers, but it's nice with flowers. Candles. And if you're at home, you can actually light your candle. Nowadays, in all these public buildings, we have to use those LED light candles. Everyone is so afraid of fire. But there's your fire. So we've had earth, water, fire, and then air is usually represented by incense. Usually we offer incense or sage, burning sage, anything that wafts. And I sometimes just stand at my altar first thing before I go out into my day, and I offer incense and I refresh the water and the flower. And I've brought myself into sacred space in a very short time. Because what we find is we don't have time for long rituals in our busy days, but we do want to center ourselves, connect with sacred space. So the individual rituals. Another one that I do, if you're familiar with the 13 grandmothers, there was a group of indigenous women elders from around the world that started gathering, I think, in the late 90s, early 2000s, because they saw what was coming. And they wanted to band together and be of service. So one of those grandmothers is a Pueblo native from Arizona or New Mexico, I'm not sure which, Flor de Mayo. And I'm reading this, and she said, "You think you don't have time for your morning ritual? I guarantee you this takes you 5 minutes, maybe 10 minutes. So what she suggested is that you greet the day, go outside, take a glass of water, and you greet the day by honoring the four elements. You take a deep breath and say, thank you for this air, and commit to keep the air pure in you and without. Drink a sip of water, thank the element of water. And then I always put my hands on the earth to thank the earth for holding me so beautifully, and then greet the sun. So there are your four elements right there. And literally, it does take only 5 minutes. And she said, I guarantee you it will change the way you move through your day. And I can attest to that. If you have the time and inclination, you can also honor the 7 directions: north, south, east, west, above, below, and within. And I don't remember my Lakota Sioux songs that call in the directions, so I just make something up, you know? Thank you, spirits of the North, for coming to us. And we thank you for your service, and we honor your presence. And then the South, I do it all. And sometimes I sort of sing it. Sometimes I have a little drum. It really doesn't matter the form. The intention is what it is. And I just feel so connected then to the land, to spirits. And then I can go about my day and be my usual distracted and busy self. But something was set, because it's a ritual. It's a ritual that in the past there were specific songs, and maybe there were different ways to honor it. But at this point, I think the intention is really what's important. So that's an example of some individual rituals. And I'm sure all of you have ways to do that. If you remember, if you feel like, oh, I can take 5 minutes, I can take 10 minutes before I set out in my day. I can go into my garden and say hello to all the plants there. As I said, those examples of individual. Now there's community rituals, which is something we practice when we do workshops, retreats, when I'm with women of spirit faith. A very important ritual is circle practice, or passing the talking stick, being in circle, coming into relationship with each other in a deeper way than just chit-chat, speaking from the heart, listening from the heart. Sometimes there's a prompt. Sometimes it's just a sharing of where we are at this moment. The circle has no head or foot. The circle is egalitarian. One of the main elements of the sacred feminine is equality. There is no hierarchy in the sacred feminine. So circle practice is something I do at all these retreats and workshops. And we bring different rituals. So I'm just going to share 3 that we did this past one. The salt ritual, which was handed to me at one of my Women of Spirit and Faith. When people gather in an intentional sacred community like we are, we can put our energies into a bowl of salt, plain old salt. We bring things to put into the salt, like little gems or flower petals, essential oils, anything that wakes up the senses. And we, as a group, one by one, go to put our prayers or hopes or intentions for our community into that salt. And we need the salt. We put our hands in it. We pulsate as we put our intentions for our families or our communities. The salt is, there's a word for it where you, like a starter dough. Participants bring salt from the last circle they were in to put into that bowl, so that that circle and this circle are now united. And then this bit of salt will go to the next circle. And so all the circles will be together in the salt. When we did the salt ritual just recently at the Jemez Springs place, we did something in a different way. We wanted to honor our female lineage, who are often quite forgotten. In this case, it was an all-women's group, so we put our name, our mother's name, and our maternal grandmother's name into the salt. We did an honoring of our mothers and 2 women who we felt needed honoring and as great teachers. Because in the Zen tradition, we always chant all the male names every morning and afternoon. Some Zen centers have now resurrected a female lineage. They were never very prominent in the hierarchy. So now some Zen centers do chant the female lineage. But I had an experience back in the 70s of a women's retreat where we did honor a teacher. And we would chant the name, and Daiyosho means great teacher. So we chant the name and we say Daiyosho. Very moving ritual and ceremony. So here we were doing it with the salt. Then Regina brought the foot washing ritual that she had practiced. And of course, we know that foot washing was an important ritual in the early Christian community. So that, in a way, tied into a more community ritual. And then we did a fire ritual in which we wrote down or stated, we actually wrote it down, things that no longer served us, that needed to go. So when we came up to the fire, we'd either say it silently or out loud with the community witnessing what you were releasing, even if we didn't hear it verbally. And into the fire it went. So even though it was individual, the community was there to witness and hold that. So those are examples of 4 community rituals. I'm going to bring up something that actually comes out of Buddhism. It's called the Jizo ceremony, which we have been practicing in our communities just recently because many of us are feeling the pain of the children who died in Gaza. So the Jizo ceremony is a Japanese ceremony or a Japanese ritual. Jizo is a bodhisattva. A bodhisattva is a liberated being who chooses not to get off the wheel of life and death because there's way too much work to do here on planet Earth. So they keep coming back to be of service. So that's a bodhisattva. And then I guess at one point they get to do their service not on Earth. That must be Jizo. Jizo looks like kind of a big baby. And Jizo is the bodhisattva for the water babies, as they are called, the babies that have been lost through miscarriage, through abortion, through stillbirth, and also very young children, and children in general. So if you have had a loss that way, there's a ritual with Jizo. Again, very embodied. You sew a little red cape or cut out a little red cape to put on the statue. And then you offer incense and you say a little chant and make a prayer tie. So again, embodied rituals. So there are 2 Zen centers here in my little town who have been making out of clay these Jizo figures. And in one of them, we've been gathering to make the Jizos and also to wrap stones in red thread that people can take with them. And the ending, we come into a circle, we do the Jizo chant, and then we pass around the list of the Gaza children who died. There's a list that was compiled by the Washington Post of 18,000 children's names. So we are obviously not going to get through them, or maybe years down the line. So we read the names, which again brings it very palpable, and also the sense of we honor you, you're not forgotten. So it's been an important ritual in our community to deal with that pain of what has happened. And I just came from an opening of an art show where all the Jizos have been displayed. And that will go on. People will continue to make the Jizos and read the names. So I think I mentioned that we find the sacred feminine in nature. One of our circle dances was called Lady of the Flowing Waters, and honoring the sacred feminine and all the aspects of nature. And the chorus is, the goddess is in everything, in every form of nature. The goddess is in everything, in every form of beauty. So nature and beauty are the pathways, it feels to me, to the sacred feminine. So before I close, I just want to share a message I received. I don't get my messages in dreams. For me, the sacred redwood grove, the old redwood grove, old growth redwoods, very rare and very special. I do my practices there. Sometimes I just sit and receive any message. And I have one tree that I'm very focused on, but across the grove was another tree. And I felt like I was getting this message. And the message was, you must arise the sacred masculine to be in partnership with the sacred feminine, or there will never be peace in the world. So that was a very strong statement. I think many of us don't know what the sacred masculine is. We have a lot of distorted masculine in our patriarchal structures. So it's a little confusing. So I remember talking to my healer about, well, what is the sacred masculine? What is the sacred feminine? He says, well, this is the sacred masculine. It's the form, it holds. It has that strength to hold the sacred feminine, which is constantly creating and changing. And that is the partnership. You can take that as a simplistic view, but it made sense to me. And it especially made sense to me when I saw it in action. I went to the Parliament of World Religions in 2016, and there was a whole Sikh community. I don't know if you're aware of the Sikhs. They're actually quite a radical. Their guru, I forget his name, back in the 1500s, absolutely felt male and female were equal, was against all the social norms of those days. So here at the Parliament is this group of Sikhs, and usually you have little presentations. Well, this group, only the women spoke. The women went up there to speak and share what they've been doing in their community, their education that they were doing, their service. And the men, if you remember the Sikhs, with their turbans, and they always have this dagger in their belt, right? And they're big guys. And they stood around the room, folded arms, legs apart, in a circle. And I said, wow, that's an example of the sacred masculine holding the sacred feminine as the women were sharing and pouring out their creativity, so to speak. So I got to see what that image was. Regina is the writer, and so we always have a writing session. And she wanted to use a prompt with the imagery of the sacred feminine. And the prompt was what I don't know or what I don't remember about the sacred feminine. Or you could use what I remember or what I know. So this came out pretty spontaneously, and I thought it would be a good way to end what I'm sharing with you and open it up for questions or shares. That would be great. So this is what I wrote. I remember the women moving through the sacred groves of trees, bringing their offerings in communion with all the elements. I remember the rituals, the dance, singing, and drumming at the liminal times of the year, the solstices, equinoxes, and the points halfway between. I don't remember when it stopped, but my heart hurts when I think of it. I feel a heaviness and compression, knowing she had to be hidden but not lost. I remember the many times I saw her face, heard her voice. Once I could believe in her presence among us now. I feel this mysterious presence right now, soft, warm, radiating love and light. I don't know how this is different from connecting with divine source, but it does feel mother-like. And though I have also experienced her fierceness and power, this moment I sit in her lap. So thank you all for being here and for receiving my sharing, my venture into what I think of as bringing it all together. Integration. Here's Regina.
I wanted to tell one small example of something that I'll remember forever about our time in Mexico City when we were exploring this. I did a simple writing exercise with people, asking them to think of two women that they learned something from or are learning something from, two women that have given them something. Doesn't have to be in their family lineage. And so people had all sorts of examples from spiritual teachers and great writers and so on. And this one very simple and heartfelt man, he just filled up with tears and he just said, I don't honor my wife for all she's given me. And he had written a whole piece about the ongoing generosity and beauty of his wife. And he ended up using the time at our retreat to write love letters to his wife. I thought that was just an example of how such simple little just reflections on this idea of the sacred feminine can actually have a very profound impact on our daily life experience.
Gosh, culturally, our ideas of masculine and feminine seem so distorted. Mm-hmm. And I get the truth of this principle of partnering the masculine and the feminine. And practically, I don't know that I always see what that actually is, because I'm so steeped in my cells of how I've been raised and conditioned. Mm-hmm. But it's very helpful to hear discussions about the sacred feminine and what that would be to embody that. And sometimes I'm confused. So, Ginny, I don't know, maybe you would say something about that, because there is this fierce power that you're referring to, but also there's a receptivity and softness to the feminine. Can you explain that?
Well, I think it encompasses both. And I see that in my own life as going from maiden, mother to crone. The fierceness comes from a certain truth. I guess truth is the word. Truth sometimes doesn't have a lot of softness. What is true, what is real can be hard-edged, but something we need to look at. Like what we're doing with the pain of what we're holding of these children who have died. The truth is not a soft truth, but it is a caring, a fierce caring for those lives and the harm that is being done. There's a fierce intention of, if there's anything we can do to mitigate the harm, we would if we could. And this is the way we're doing it, by honoring it and not closing our eyes. So there's a fierceness to facing up and to showing up for those hard truths. Yeah, I guess I never think of truth as soft. You know, we talk about the hard truths, right? And that's in the sacred feminine also. You can't look away. This is what is here. And we can't transcend it. That's not really an option, or it's not a skillful option. Buddhism, I love, they don't say good or bad. It's either skillful or unskillful, which takes away the morality issue, I think. So yes, turning away is not a skillful approach, or kind of, oh, everything's going to be okay, which is what mothers do, you know. That's a mother thing. We're going to hold you. Everything's going to be okay. We'll take care of it. But the grandmother, so I'm actually morphing into the grandmother, because now I am a grandmother of 7. And I see that it's a different way of being in the sacred feminine, the grandmother, the elder, crone. So there's stages, is how I think of it.
What I really want to share is that my lineage is Advaita Vedanta. And so I come from a very fierce male lineage in India. And with non-duality, I was teaching non-duality in its very purest form for a number of years. And then something just could no longer be ignored. the embodiment aspect, the manifestation, the feminine. So after a number of years of teaching, there was so much spiritual bypassing going on in my little Sangha, and the ferocity of the body, the embodiment, the use of the emotions in the awakening, in the realization, could no longer be ignored. And what I realized is that this lineage is evolving. This lineage is evolving, and I am a woman teaching through a female form, which doesn't happen in our big heavy hitters in the lineages. So for a while, I formed a group of a women's Sangha because I needed to relax with them. And it's called Women's Embodied Wisdom. It's an opportunity to allow the unique experiences for us as women while being held in the non-dual, in the absolute.
I love what you said about these lineages are evolving. They're not stuck in cement. I didn't share with you that my teacher around 2000 when I was ordained, he asked me to work with women. He said in his experience, because he had never worked with women in Japan, his experience of working with men and women was that women understood these principles of relationship and equality and devotion that are there in all these spiritual traditions. He said women get there very quickly, but they have no confidence to take their truth out into the world. He said men take forever, ever to really understand those principles. But once they do, they're off like a shot. There's no problem of confidence. So he wanted me to work with women because he felt in his way, the world needed these truths that women could help to bring. And so I did Rinzai women's retreats for many years. And we even had a retreat center till burned down. And I've been inspired to go back to do women retreats and evolve the form so that it is more embodied or there's more balance there. So thank you. You inspired me.
I also have to bring up this, what you called the warriorness, which was fierce and courageous and the sword and absolutely necessary. And yet, what about the softening aspect within that paradox that is being lived in the human? So that's also just another whole interesting intersection right there, the necessity for both.
Mm-hmm.
One of the things that was so interesting to me in working with Ginny is that whereas the group in Mexico City, among other groups, was asking for the sacred feminine, they were so appreciative that Ginny was bringing them some structured meditation form. So as a part of our practice, we did a couple of hours of sitting and walking and sitting and walking. And the rest of our day was filled with these embodied rituals and circles and all of that. But the hunger was there for both. The hunger is there to bring those two together.
When I teach Zazen, I teach it as an embodied practice. I put a lot of emphasis on the hara, the belly, and often I will also suggest that they could use a grounding cord to get the difficult energies, emotions into the earth that can receive it and make that connection. So I am teaching it a little different than the way I received it, but embodiment seems really important.
Well, one of the ways that I've understood the teaching dharmically is that the masculine represents formlessness or consciousness, and the feminine manifestation or form. But we're all embodied either in a male or female form, and we have both of these elements in us. How to open to them both. It's always made sense to me that to be a man fully, I also needed to embody the feminine yin yang, practice when to be receptive and when to be strong and definitive.
For creative and holding that creativity. The source in Buddhism is Tathagata Garbha, which means the womb of the mother, where all things come from. So consciousness, in that sense, has a female meaning in the Tathagata Garbha, the source of all, the womb of the mother.
Another thing that's always made sense to me is something my teacher said, that in relationship to the divine, we're all feminine. We need to be feminine and receptive in relationship to what the universe provides.
Mm-hmm.
And then we act.
Skillfully or unskillfully?
Yes, hopefully skillfully.
So both Regina and I have been experiencing a re-interest in her writing, The Woman Awake, and I was in a book called The Unknown She, which was sort of prescient to this turning towards the aspect of divinity in a female icon. So these manifestations of Green Tara and Kuan Yin and Guadalupe, the Virgin Guadalupe, they seem to be very present right now. I don't know if everyone else is experiencing this. And young women are really gravitating towards these icons. The Mary Magdalene movement is quite huge. And people are doing whole retreats on Kuan Yin now, which never happened 20, 30 years ago. So it seems very in our cultural, spiritual zeitgeist. And perhaps because we are experiencing a particularly difficult and unbalanced form of the masculine, of the patriarchy right now. So perhaps that is why these icons are arising. If anyone else has been feeling that or gravitating to that.
The whole background behind me is a testament to what you're talking about.
I see that.
And in the ancient Christian tradition, they refer to the Virgin Mary as the Theotokos. So we don't just think of her as a person, but as a divine principle.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know much about the Baal tradition, but that came from Lord Chaitanya back in the 1500s. And one way to describe that tradition is Raganuga Bhakti. And so you always see Radha and Krishna together. But the secret teaching is that Radha has a slight supremacy. And when we go to India, to this area that they describe as the dissension area of Lord Krishna, in Sanskrit, all the trees are painted with Radha's name. And when I think of Buddha, I think of Buddha or in Zen sitting beneath the tree and attaining enlightenment. But in these traditions in India, it's not a sense of effort to attain and rising up. It's the understanding that God descends. So there's a real emphasis on the idea of grace, the feminine principle of grace.
Are you aware of the Buddha Mudra when he comes out of the 7 days, the last temptation of Mara, because he's been tempted all of these 7 days, is who are you to think you have realized anything? And he touches the earth with his left hand and says, the earth is my witness. And so many of the statues of Buddha will have one hand in the half mudra and the left hand touching the earth.
Mm-hmm.
So it's still connected.
If you want to take it to the roots of some of our Catholic doctrines, the mother has promised that she would come back in times of greatest distress. And so, at least within the Christian Catholic tradition, she appears in places at times when there's great wars, at times when there's great need. So we have her in Shastakawa, we have her in, of course, Guadalupe, but she's everywhere, So I think that she's coming back not necessarily as one singular, but she's coming back as the feminine.
I do have a deep sense that our survival as a species, even the earth, is going to require the feminine understanding appearing. The days of the knight in shining armor riding in and saving the day are over. The feminine principles of consensus and collaboration are the only way we'll get through this.
It just seems like such a need for role models today. Boys grow up with distorted views of what masculinity is, still, even more so, maybe, than in years past. And women, girls, having a daughter has really been a learning experience for me. How it happens that we get socialized, how we get socialized, and have to work with going deeper into who we really are. But I'm just really struck with the need for role models, which are noticeably absent in the culture.
I want to share that my Women of Spirit and Faith group is multi-generational. We are 20-somethings up to 80-somethings. And it has been a rich and fruitful experience to be together and to do these practices. The elders are learning so much from the youngers, and the youngers are so appreciative of having elders in their life. So if it can happen that we break down these barriers between the generations, I think that helps to break through the more toxic parts of the cultural conditioning. And I know my sons, and some of them, young men, are also attending retreats and circles with other young men, and again, multi-generational. So that's very encouraging to me.
What have you seen relevant to breaking down barriers between the genders?
Well, like in our Sacred Feminine workshop, there were men there. And it felt fine to be bringing the feminine out in men, and in creating the form. The women were participating in their masculine. So I'm not sure that there's a purposeful way of working cross-gender, but being alert and open to those possibilities when they arise of real communication and honoring those elements in each other is what I strive for. And then, I have these 3 sons and many grandsons, so dealing with it on a family level.
I just want to tell a quick little sweet story.
Please.
I was a part-time nanny for years, and one of the little boys that I nannied, he loved to do yard work, and I had a statue of the Virgin Mary in the yard, and he hadn't noticed it, but we were doing yard work, and he said, "There's a Mama Buddha," and he was pointing to the Virgin Mary. And I said, "Yeah, that's a Mama Buddha."
That's lovely. He maybe knew that Mama Buddha too. On another plane.
I know it just seems like you have brought something to this warrior Zen Rinzai practice that maybe is evolutionary, or it's growing to encompass more than it has in the past. And that really seems important.
Thank you.